There you go. Good morning, guys. Happy blessed Monday, and welcome back to Storyteller's Corner for Monday, the 6th of July. And thank you for joining me. Now, we'll go back to our Victorian romantic scandal in London, in England. And this is chapter 31 now, A Man Before the Family. So let's see, excuse me, guys, let's see what's happening there. By the time evening had settled over Whitmore House, the entire house seemed suspended in a state of waiting. No one said it aloud, of course. No one would be ever so reckless. But from the drawing room to the servants' corridors, from the kitchens to the upper bedchambers, an awareness had spread through the house like smoke under a door. Something was coming, something larger than gossip, larger than a withdrawn proposal, larger even than a scandal that had already begun to stain the Wimborne name. Thomas Reed was to be received by Lord Wimborne, not a chauffeur, not as a servant, but as a man, and in a house built upon order, rank, and generations of unspoken rules. That fact alone was enough to alter the air. Caroline stood at the window of her bedchamber at dusk, deepened over the grounds, her hands clasped tightly before her. The garden below was darkening to shadows. Bare branches moved faintly in the evening wind. Somewhere beyond the west lawn a carriage rolled along the lane, faded into the distance. The ordinary sounds of evening, and yet nothing felt ordinary. Her maid, Ellen, moved quietly about the room, laying out fresh shawls, tidying a dressing table that did not need tidying, pretending not to notice that Caroline had not sat still for more than a minute at a time since returning from the drawing room. At last Ellen turned and said gently, "If you continue pacing like that, my lady, you'll wear a path straight through the carpet." Caroline looked at her, startled in the smallest smile. Am I so obvious?" "A little." Ellen hesitated. "Would you like me to say something comforting?" Caroline let out a breath that almost resembled laughter. "If you think of something convincing, by all means." Ellen considered that without touching seriousness. "No," she said at last, "I don't believe I can." That, more than any empty reassurance might have done, made Caroline smile properly. When Ellen left her to dress for dinner, the room seemed suddenly too quiet. Caroline crossed to the mirror and studied her own reflection. She had chosen a gown of deep green silk, severe in cut and almost austere in ornament, as though simplicity might lend her courage. Her hair was arranged neatly and her expression composed. She looked every inch of a lady of her station, and yet beneath the calm surface of her face her heart was in open revolt, because downstairs, somewhere in the rooms below, Thomas was preparing to walk into a conversation that could alter both their lives, and she could do nothing to stop it. The dinner that evening was one of the strangest Caroline had ever endured. Her uncle was grave and quiet than usual. Her aunt attempted conversation twice and abandoned it both times. Lord Ashford, still staying at the house, seemed to have retreated into a thoughtful silence that made him look older, and Lord Wren, who had accepted the unexpected invitation to remain, watched the table with an unsettling expression of a man attending a political negotiation disguised as supper. But no one mentioned Thomas. No one mentioned the drawing room, and no one mentioned what would happen after dinner, when the ladies withdrew and Lord Wimborne sent for the man who had dared to love his niece. But the absence of a subject was louder than speech. Caroline barely tasted the food set before her. Her fork touched the pheasant. Her wine remained almost untouched. Every time a servant entered the room, she looked up instinctively, half expecting some message, some interruption, some sign that Thomas had changed his mind and fled the house entirely. But he had not. She knew he would not. That frightened her. When at last dinner ended, her uncle rose with the heaviness of a man stepping towards a necessary battle. "Lady Caroline," he said before the ladies withdrew, "I would ask that you remain." Lord Ashford looked up at once. Her aunt's hands tightened slightly around her napkin. Wren's brow rose almost imperceptibly. Caroline went still. Remain? Yes. Her uncle held her gaze. If Mr. Reed is to speak of you, I would rather he do it before you than behind your back. The words are so blunt, but not unkind. Caroline inclined her head. Thank you. Her uncle muttered something that sounded suspicious like, do not thank me yet. The drawing room was prepared with almost painful formality. The fire burned low in the grate. Lamps cast warm pools of light over polished wood and pale carpet. The great portrait of Caroline's grandparents stared down from above the mantel with all the disapproval of the dead. Lord Wimborne stood near the fireplace. Her aunt took a chair near the settee, her face pale but steady. Lord Ashford remained by the window, hands clasped behind his back. Lord Wren, after a briefest hesitation, placed himself slightly apart from the others, leaning lightly against a bookcase as though determined not to interfere unless absolutely necessary. Excuse me, guys. Caroline sat on the edge of a settee, every nerve alive. No one spoke. The clock on the mantelpiece ticked twice, 3 times. Then came the knock on the door. There you go, guys. Sound effects. Then came a knock on the door. Come, said Uncle. The door opened. Thomas entered. Caroline had seen him in evening dress before, only in fragments, when formal events require him to wait upon the family or drive late into the night, but never like this. Tonight he wore a dark black coat, perfectly fitted but unadorned, the kind of attire that might allow him to pass as a distance for a gentleman if one was not looking too closely. For the difference society treasured, his hair was neatly brushed back, his face was calm. Too calm. Caroline knew him well enough now to recognise the strain beneath it. He closed the door behind him and bowed. My lord, and more softly to the room at large. My lady, Lady Caroline, Lord Ashford, Lord Wren. He was not hiding from what this was. He was walking into it fully. Lord Wimborne regarded him for a long moment before speaking. Mr. Reed. Sir, you requested to speak to me as a man, not as a member of my staff. Excuse me, guys. Yes. Then speak. No invitation to sit, no easing of the matter, only truth demanded plainly. Thomas accepted it. He stepped forward 1 pace and clasped his hands behind his back, not submissively, but to keep them still. I know how this must appear to you, he says. Lord Wimborne gave a short, tired laugh. I assure you, Mr. Reed, it appears in a great many ways. Few of them are comforting. A faint flicker touched Thomas's mouth, gone almost at once. I believe that. He drew a breath. I also know that no explanation I offer can undo the scandal already attached to Lady Caroline's name. I know what has been risks, what has already been lost, and what may yet be lost if the matter continues. He did not look at Caroline when he said it, he looked only at her uncle. I have thought of little else for weeks. Lord Ashford shifted slightly near the window, but said nothing. Thomas continued, I would never have chosen to place her in this position. Caroline's heart tightened, not because she doubted him, because she knew it was true. But I did choose to love her. There it was, simple, unadorned, spoken aloud in a room where such sentence ought never to have been uttered. Her aunt drew a breath. Lord Ashford closed his eyes briefly. Wren's expression did not change, though something sharpened in his gaze. Caroline could not move, she could only watch him. Thomas remained steady. I did not intend it. I thought it where I could told myself. I did not intend it. I thought it where I could. I told myself every sensible thing a man in my position ought to tell himself. A faint shadow of rue crossed his face. It appears I am less sensible than I have hoped. To Caroline's astonishment, Lord Wren's mouth twitched. Her uncle, however, did not smile. You speak of love as though it excuses recklessness. No, sir, Thomas answered, came immediately. I speak of it because I have no right to ask for your respect while concealing the truth from you. The room fell silent again. Her uncle folded his hands behind his back. And what exactly are you asking for, Mr. Reed? The question was quiet, dangerously quiet. Thomas held his gaze. I am asking for the chance to remain in this house without deceit between us. A pause. And if Lady Caroline wishes it, Caroline's pulse hammered, for the chance to seek an honourable future with her. Her aunt's hands flew to her throat. Lord Ashford stared openly now. In all attempts at neutrality is gone. Even Wren straightened slightly from the bookcase, and Lord Wimborne looked as though Thomas had calmly announced his intention to challenge Parliament. An honourable future, her uncle repeated. Yes. With my niece? Yes. You, a chauffeur in my employ, are asking me to consider honourable future with Caroline, though you have just requested a place at luncheon? Thomas did not flinch. No, sir. I am asking as a man who knows he has no right to expect it, but every duty to be honest about wanting it. Caroline felt something fierce and painful rise in her chest. He was not pleading. He was not shrinking. He was simply standing there offering truth where the room expected apology. Lord Wimborne began to pace, not quickly, but with the contained agitation of a man trying to keep hold of his temper through movement alone. You say you love her. Very well, let us assume I believe you. Thomas said nothing. Love is easy enough to declare when one has nothing else to offer. That landed exactly at her uncle's as intended. Her aunt winced. Caroline went rigid, but Thomas answered with maddening calm. You are right. The room stilled. Thomas went on. I have no title to offer her, no fortune worthy of her, no house, no family influence, no protection from gossip beyond my own willingness to stand beside her and bear as much of it as I can. His eyes did not leave Wimborne's face. If that is insufficient, I understand. Caroline's breath caught, not because he was surrendering, because he was not. He was laying every weakness bare and refusing to dress it up as something else. Lord Wimborne stopped pacing. And yet you ask? Yes. Why? Thomas hesitated only for a moment, then he turned at least and looked at Caroline. Not too long, not in a way that would insult the room, but long enough that everyone present saw the answer before it was spoken. Because I believe she would be unhappy without me, he said quietly. Caroline's eyes burned. And because I know I would be unhappy without her. No one interrupted, not even Lord Ashford, not even Lord Wimborne. It was too honest, a thing to cut across. Her uncle looked at Caroline, and not at Thomas. At her. Is that true? The question seemed to cross the room like an hand laid directly over her heart. Caroline rose slowly to her feet. She had not planned to speak, had not intended to interrupt, but there is no longer any possibility of remaining seated while the shape of her life was debated around her, as if she was merely a topic. Yes, she said. Her voice was softer than Thomas had been, but less certain. It is true. Lord Wimborne's eyes closed. For one long second Caroline thought he might simply refuse to continue, dismiss Thomas, send everyone away, put an end to the matter by force of authority and call it duty. Instead, he opened his eyes and looked exhausted. Caroline, sit down. No. The refusal before she could stop it. Lord Ashford looked appalled. Her aunt looked alarmed. Wren looked interested. Her uncle looked as though he had aged 5 years in 5 seconds. No, he repeated. No. Caroline took a breath. If Thomas is expected to stand here and have his character measured before everyone in this room, then I will not remain seated like a child, waiting to be told where she may be placed at her affections. Her uncle stared at her. She pressed on anyway. You ask what he can offer me. I ask what any of the men chosen of me have ever offered beyond convenience. Caroline, her aunt whispered, but Caroline shook her head. No, aunt, not tonight. She turned back to her uncle. Lord Pembroke offered me safety because he assumed I would be grateful to be rescued from my own feelings. Others have offered titles, houses, polite companionship, and but the promise that if I behaved well enough I might one day become a mistress of some respectable estate and call it a life. Her hands were trembling, but she did not care. Thomas is the first person who has ever asked me what I want, and treated the answer as if it mattered. The room had gone utterly still. Her aunt was crying silently now, but whether from pride or fear, Caroline could not tell. Lord Ashford had turned away towards the window, perhaps to preserve what remained of his composure, and Thomas was looking as though he had forgotten the rest of the room existed. Lord Wimborne sank slowly into a chair. It was not the movement of a defeated man. It was the movement of a man realised that an argument had shifted beneath his feet, and he had noticed what had happened. He looked from Caroline to Thomas and back again. At length, he said very quietly, "Do either of you understand what you are asking of me?" Thomas answered first, "Yes." Caroline answered in a second, "We do." Wren murmured under his breath, "I rather think they do." Ashley shot him a look. Her uncle ignored them all. "If I permit this, even if I consider permitting this, there will be consequences." "We know," Caroline said. "Society may not forgive it." Thomas spoke this time. "I know. You both might find yourself miserable under burdens you do not fully understand." "We may," Caroline said. "Then why," her uncle demanded, genuine anguish breaking through at last, "do you both look as though I am the only person in this room who still believes this is impossible?" The question broke something open, not in anger, in sorrow. Caroline crossed the room before she had fully decided to do it, and knelt beside his chair, as she had done when she was a little girl, asking pardon after some childish mistake. Only this was no childish mistake, and no pardon. She laid her hands over his. "Because it has already happened," she said softly. Her face changed. "The impossible part, I mean, it has already happened." A tear slipped free, though her voice did not shake. "I love him. He loves me. The world may think that's ridiculous, inconvenient, shameful or absurd, but none of that makes it less true." Her uncle stared at her face for a long time, then at Thomas, still standing straight backed and pale in the middle of the room, then at his own hands beneath hers. When he spoke, his voice was rough. "I do not know how to manage this." No one answered, because for once there was nothing to argue with. At last he looked at Thomas. "If I told you to leave this house tonight, would you go?" Caroline's breath stopped. Thomas did not answer immediately. He considered the question with painful seriousness, as though it would not insult the room by pretending it was simpler than it was. Then he said, "If Lady Caroline asked me to go for her sake, yes." Caroline turned sharply towards him. He went on, But if you ask it only to make the problem disappear, no, sir." The room froze. Even Wren's brows lifted. Lord Ashford actually took a step away from the window, and Lord Wimborne stared at Thomas as if unsure whether to be outraged or astonished. Thomas did not lower his gaze. "I mean no disrespect, but I have already offered to remove myself once. I have considered leaving, and I know exactly what it would cost her. I will not call this sacrifice if it is only cowardice dressed as a duty." Caroline felt tears prickle her eyes again. Good Lord, he had actually said it, to her uncle, in his own drawing-room, and somewhere impossible the house had not collapsed. There was long, dangerous silence. Then Lord Wimborne did something no one expected. He laughed. Only once. A short, incredulous laugh, stripped of humour and full of exhausted disbelief. "Well," he said, rubbing his hands over his face, "at least you are honest." Wren let out a quiet breath that might have been relief. Ashford looked faintly scandalised that anyone could laugh at all. Her uncle leaned back in his chair and looked up at the ceiling for a moment as though petitioning heaven for patience. When he lowered his gaze again, he seemed calmer. Not pleased, not approving, but calmer. "I am not giving my blessing tonight." Neither Caroline nor Thomas moved. "I am not promising an engagement, a courtship, or whatever mad modern terms one might use for this disaster." At that, Wren coughed and suspiciously in his hand. Lord Wimborne shot him a look. "But he continued, I'm turning back to Thomas. I am not ordering you from the house. Caroline's breath caught. Thomas remained still, though she saw the muscle in his jaw tighten. You will continue your duties for now, her uncle said. Nothing improper, nothing secretive, nothing that makes a mocker of his household. Yes, sir. And Caroline, yes, you will not meet him alone, not until I have decided whether I have lost my mind completely. To Caroline's astonishment, a laugh escaped her. Her uncle glared. Do not make me revoke the entire arrangement before it happens. I'm sorry, you are not. No, she admitted breathless with relief, not very. Her aunt laughed softly, then tears still bright on her cheeks. The sound transformed the room. Not into safety, nothing so simple, but into something less hopeless. Lord Wimborne looked at Thomas one final time. If you are serious, and God help us all, I believe you are, then you will prove it by patience. Thomas bowed his head. I will. You will give me time to consider what future, if any, can be made from this. Yes, sir. And if I decide there is none? That question settled over the room like mist over cold ground. Thomas lifted his head. His answer was quiet. Then I will still be grateful that you heard me as a man. Lord Wimborne stared at him. Something in his face shifted. Not approval, not yet, but perhaps the first unwilling edge of respect. The conversation might have ended there. Perhaps it should have. But fate, which had shown a remarkable talent for timing throughout the whole of Caroline's scandal, had other plans. A sharp knock at the door. Everyone turned. Hawthorne entered, more pale than Caroline had ever seen him. My lord, he said. There was something in his voice that made the room tighten instantly. What is it now? Lord Wimborne asked, sounding almost beyond surprise. Hawthorne swallowed. There is a reporter at the gate. The silence that followed was different from all the others. Colder, harder. A threat from beyond the walls. A reporter? Ashford repeated. Yes, my lord. Hawthorne looked at Caroline, then Thomas, then back to her uncle. He claims to have information concerning Lady Caroline and Mr. Reed. He has requested a statement. No one moved. No one seemed to breathe. Whitmore House had managed to whisper. It survived the proposal, the confrontation, and the confession. But now London itself was knocking at the door. Not society in the drawing room, not private gossiping among the well-born, the press, the public, the next more merciful stage of a scandal. Lord Wimborne rose slightly to his feet. His face had gone hard with a kind of grim resolve Caroline had not yet seen before. He looked at Thomas, then at Caroline, then at the room as a whole. Well, he said at last with weary bitterness, it seems we are past the point of keeping this family a matter. As the fire crackled low, the wind pressed softly at the window. Caroline realised that whatever happened next would no longer remain inside the walls of Whitmore House. By morning, all of London might know Thomas Reed's name. And if that happened, love would no longer be merely a scandal. It would become a public war. Wow. So there you go, guys. It's certainly picking up pace, the relationship, a scandal in London. Sorry it went on so long, guys, but these matters have to be publicly stated. So there we go, guys. I hope you enjoyed that story of scandal in Victorian London. Join me tonight, guys, where we're off to our little village of Willowmere, and it is our story of a Clockmaker's Secret. Chapter 5, The Bench on Lantern Hill. So join me for that tonight, guys. And until then, guys, if you haven't fell asleep after that long story, thank you for joining me in Storyteller's Corner. Bye bye now. God bless us all. Bye bye.